Hey guys, this is God of Politics, and welcome back to a brand new video. In this video, I'm talking about some of the most recent news from the Democratic primary and what that means for the upcoming primaries and caucuses and results, and how that's going to translate to even the general election. We'll talk about that. But the first news of the day is obviously that Elizabeth Warren has dropped out of the race. She should have dropped out before, in my opinion. She didn't really have a path to nomination, and then on Super Tuesday, obviously, she did very poorly, even losing her home state, coming in third place, as we can see here, losing to Biden by over just 12 points here. That was a huge loss for her, and now she has dropped out because of it. But in the process, she has possibly taken away a number of delegates from Bernie Sanders. Will all of her vote that she would have gotten in the upcoming primaries, will all of that vote go to Bernie Sanders? Nobody's really sure. One could assume that most of it would, but I'm not so sure about that. I think a lot of it could go to Biden. I think that if she wanted all the vote to go to Bernie, she would have endorsed Bernie, but she said that she hasn't. She isn't going to endorse anybody at this time. But looking at the upcoming primaries, we see Biden has all the momentum right now. He's even leading against Bernie, even though Bernie did win by 8 points in California. Biden pretty much sweeping everywhere else. We can see the future doesn't look too bright for him either. We can see he could win North Dakota, he could win Idaho, he could win Washington. This is just for March 10th. A new poll came out today from Michigan. We can probably look at it right here. There was a Michigan poll. Let's see if we can find it. A Michigan poll here. We see Biden was up by 6 points with Bloomberg at 11, Buttigieg at 6, Klobuchar at 3. And what we saw earlier was that all of Buttigieg and Klobuchar's vote did in fact go to Biden for the most part, as they didn't endorse him, but there was skepticism to whether the vote would go to Biden, and as you saw, it did before. But if you combine Bloomberg, Buttigieg, and Sanders, who all endorsed Biden, their vote counts up to 20% of the vote to Warren's only 7%. So if you assume all of Warren's 7% of the vote goes to Bernie, and even just some of that 20% from the other moderate candidates that did actually endorse Joe Biden, Biden wins by a landslide in Michigan. And if you look at the 538 chances here, we see Michigan. Bernie is still forecasted to win a lot of the vote. He is forecast to win 34%, and he says that it has a 53% chance just to Biden's 44% chance, which is basically a tie. But as you can see here, obviously the chances for Joe Biden have gone up a lot, but it even gives Bloomberg a chance for a lot of delegates. It gives a chance for Buttigieg, and obviously they're not in the race anymore, so obviously a lot of that vote is going to go to Joe Biden. We see Bloomberg's forecast to get 17. Obviously, all of that pretty much would go to Joe Biden. And Elizabeth Warren, you could say most of it would go to Bernie Sanders, but in this case, Joe Biden would come on top. If you're going to look at Washington, it looks like Bernie Sanders could win here. But we did see, if we can find it, that there was a poll from Washington earlier that showed that this could be a close race when it actually comes to the election. We see Sanders is up by 8 points in terms of the polling here, but the most recent polling we have, Biden was only at 10%, but you see Bloomberg 15, Buttigieg 9, Klobuchar 11. If you combine all of those, they add up to 35, and if you give all of that vote to Biden, he's at 45. If you give all of Warren's vote to Bernie, he's only at 32. So even if not all of the moderate vote goes to Biden, it looks like Biden could put could put the state of Washington in play for the primary. And if Joe Biden is able to win Washington and the state of Michigan, Bernie's chances are basically done, because you assume that Joe Biden wins Washington, he wins Michigan, he will obviously win Mississippi and Missouri, which are also states going on March 10th, just a week after Super Tuesday. And you could give Idaho, North Dakota. They don't have many delegates anyway. But then you go to the next week, you have a lot of states that you wouldn't assume Bernie Sanders to do very well in. If we keep going down here to the next couple of primaries that we have here, as you can see, Michigan, for some reason, Michigan, North Dakota, they predict to go to Bernie, obviously. Democrats are they predict to go to Bernie. But then we get into the next week. We can see Illinois, obviously, is a March 17th state. We have a lot of big states here. We'll go to Florida first. But in Florida, obviously, if we look at the poll here, the most recent poll that came out from Florida, it looks to be very good for Joe Biden. We saw there's a poll out today where he was up by 47 points. and this includes Michael Bloomberg at 14. So if you give Michael Bloomberg support, which would put Joe Biden at 75%, and Warren's only at 5% of this poll, so her being in the race really wouldn't have made much of a difference because she doesn't have much of the vote. And what you might see here is Bernie will barely be viable, and Joe Biden will get most of the results in Florida. And as we were looking at here, he's expected to win Florida, as I just talked about. He's expected to win Illinois here, according to this. And Ohio, Biden's expected to win that as well. Arizona, Bernie's expected to win by only 16%, and that assumes that Bloomberg is going to get a lot of delegates as well. So you could assume that Joe Biden would win those big states. You've got 4 big states here going: Florida, Illinois, Ohio, Arizona, all going on this date. And if we've already assumed that Washington and Michigan and Mississippi and Missouri are all going to go to Joe Biden, it looks pretty much over for him. And another thing to note, Missouri has more delegates than Arizona, despite Arizona being a trending state that does go Democratic by less, does go Republican by less margins, obviously, than Missouri does. Missouri has more Democratic pledged delegates, and Biden's going to win this state by a lot. So if you got the momentum of him winning Washington, Michigan, Missouri, Mississippi, maybe even he puts these states in play, Idaho and North Dakota. Then you go to March 17th, you've got an easy win for Biden in Florida, an easy win in Illinois, an easy win in Ohio, and then you could even say that he'll pretty comfortably win Arizona. Nobody expected him to come close in Maine or Massachusetts or Minnesota, and then he won those states by large margins for the most part. And then we get obviously to Georgia the next time, where you see Bernie isn't expected to do very well either. Biden's supposed to do very well, and all these things are including Michael Bloomberg as well, who has dropped out. So you can give most of Bloomberg's delegates to Joe Biden, and that's going to give Joe Biden the big boost. The thing about Super Tuesday was supposed to be Bernie's best delegates day. He thought he can win the Latino vote in Texas and therefore win it overall. He can win California by a large margin. He can win Minnesota, win Massachusetts, win Maine. He can even put states like Virginia and North Carolina and even Tennessee in play, while also winning Utah, Colorado, Vermont by large landslides. And a lot of that didn't actually happen. He didn't do as well in California as he should have. He lost Texas. He lost the South by large margins. He even lost Minnesota, Maine, and Massachusetts. Those states were supposed to be layups for him. And if we turn up to the delegate, betting odds here, we can see Biden obviously shooting up. He was at 9.9% on. If we go right after the South Carolina results, he goes from about 20%. And then, as you can see here on Super Tuesday, it goes from 45% to 63%. He is now at an 86% chance of winning the nomination. And the chances of him winning a majority are obviously lower. If we go to the 538 here, it says that a contested convention is still a 61% chance. I don't really buy that. I think Joe Biden is going to get a majority of the delegates. I just don't see any path for Bernie to get enough of delegates that he needs in states like Ohio and Illinois. As we can see, they were fighting, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders were fighting over the vote of the working class white voters. And as we can see, Joe Biden has been eating into that. Bernie Sanders thought, okay, if I can solidify that base of the working class white voters, I can expand into black voters, I can expand into Latino voters. Sure, he's expanded into Latino voters, but Joe Biden remains very strong amongst the black vote. And that's going to bode well for him in states like Michigan, obviously, and Illinois, and all the other factors that play into it. A lot of suburban vote in Florida, and as we can see now, Bernie's best state probably the entire primary. Joe Biden basically, I think he does have a majority of the delegates. And as we get more delegates from these states too, Joe Biden will have a majority of the delegates, and Bernie's best states have already been coming around. But it does basically give Bernie a 1 in 12 chance, which is a very low chance, almost no chance basically, and it's been going down as well. The only chance I really see of Bernie getting the nomination is maybe Biden just continues to say stupid things. Maybe the investigation to him by the Senate Republicans continues. Maybe he does some stupid thing in a debate. That could happen. I mean, we've seen Joe Biden do a lot of things like that before. He hasn't had the best debate for horses a lot of the time, like the first debate when Kamala Harris destroyed him. A lot of people said. And that looks like it could be bad for Biden. There will be a lot of attacks coming on him, just like it happened to Bernie, just like it happened to Bloomberg, just like it happened to Warren, just like it happened to everybody when they start rising up in the polls. You see all this bad media coverage come out to him. A lot of people complain about Joe Biden getting all this positive media coverage. He's not necessarily going to get all of that now from both sides of the aisle, the non-establishment Democrats from the Bernie Bros side and from the Republicans too, who don't think that he should be doing as well. And then in terms of the general election, we'll just wrap this up here. Things are looking worse for Trump as the day goes on. His approval rating, as you can see here, has dipped down a little bit. We don't get too much into this, but his approval rating has dipped down a little bit. We see some new Senate polls seeing Democrats can win in Maine and Arizona. Also, Biden winning in Arizona, and we'll see how this continues. Obviously, Joe Biden might not do very well on the debate stage against Donald Trump if it comes to that. But yeah, just wanted to run through everything. Then we have some more news that Elizabeth Warren has dropped that could help Bernie marginally. But overall, I still think this is Biden's to win. I think he is going to win. I think he's going to win a majority of the delegates. And that's just what I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe as always, and I will see you guys later.